All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Jerry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's up, Cody?
Yo, what's going on?
Not much, not much. Same old, same old. Staying busy. So let's dive right into it this week. We got a little bit hung up last week. We've got our Country Shore giveaway. You can sign up for that on our Facebook page. Country Shore is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And the winner this week, I have to look up real quick. Remember they were from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I can't remember.
Was it Bob Uecker? Was it Bob Uecker?
If it's not, it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bob Uecker should win everything.
Unfortunately, it's not Bob Uecker. It's actually Gary G. from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So, Gary, you've got a Country Shore hat and copies of our ebooks heading your way. But also, if you know Bob Uecker, have him give us a shout.
Yeah, Bob, if you're listening out there, let us know, because I'm not sure if you're still alive. I was just thinking about that. I think he is.
Oh, that should be the question of the week for this week.
I really don't know. I think he is, and I don't want to look it up. I'm going to say yes, he is. What do you say?
Is he? I thought he died. I'm going to go with no. I think he's dead.
Okay. Let's see, and the answer is he is still alive.
Okay. Way to go, Bob.
Yeah, he's still alive. Born in 1934.
So we could still make another major league with Bob Uecker, right?
Oh, gosh. If there's a major league that doesn't have Bob Uecker in it, it's not a major league.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, he was obviously an announcer for the Milwaukee Brewers, which is why I said is his name Bob Uecker, but he was actually born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin as well.
Well, now that is just, we're learning something new every day.
This is
why you tune in to the Gunner Technology Livestream, folks.
This is what technology is all about, is serendipitous knowledge.
Speaking of serendipitous knowledge, we had a question of the week last week, Cody. What was that?
Yeah, the question of the week last week was, have you automated any part of your life in the last year? And I want to say the question was not clear, because our vote count was down a little bit. You two were up around like 2,000 people voting across the number of our platforms, and we were down around like 1,400. So I don't think people kind of understood the question. And so but the overwhelming response was no, they haven't, which is kind of interesting, because we mentioned a couple examples on how easy it would be to automate your life, and how doing so in those small cases really adds a lot of freedom to your life, especially things like remembering to follow up on an email and simple kind of reminders and things like that. So I'm thinking that the answer, which wouldn't shock me, or excuse me, the question, which wouldn't shock me, wasn't exactly clear.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it was overwhelmingly no. Maybe people just aren't automating their lives.
74%.
Yeah, maybe people just enjoy doing stuff, and they're sick of technology doing everything for them.
The thing is, though, like everyone complains about root tasks. Everyone complains about it. So I can't imagine they're happy doing it, especially at work. So the question was life or work. So if you're doing root tasks at work, let us know, because you're doing something wrong.
We'll fix that for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of fixing something for someone, the case study that we're going to do this week, although before we get to that, what's the question of the week for next week?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you can't skip the question of the week this week, because I figured out how to put GIFs as the responses.
All right.
Which I guess it's actually pronounced GIFs. I think we lost that war. I think it's actually pronounced GIFs officially.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I'm going to ignore that, though, and call it GIFs. And so the question of the week this week it's kind of in the same vein of our case study today. Are you concerned about our elections being hacked or compromised in this midterm election? And the choices are yep or nope.
That's a good question. It's topical.
I mean, and again, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where you would see on like Fox or MSNBC, where it's like, well, define compromised. Like, do I think vote counts will be actually changed by hacking into election systems? I don't. Do I think that they'll be compromised in the fact that there will be influence campaigns run by foreign influences. Yes, I do think that will happen.
Does that count? Does that count as compromise, or is that just taking advantage of people being dumb?
In the words of the greatest book series of all time, choose your own adventure.
And hop on our Facebook page and answer that question of the week. But let's dive into it right now. We're going to talk about we're going to go through another case study that we did for a product that we built called Talk It Out. So Cody, just give an overview of what Talk It Out is, what it did and all that.
Yeah. So as we have a couple, we can't divulge who the client was because it was a sensitive kind of topic or some sensitive type of application, but I'll give a couple of use cases. So obviously you have like the consumer aspect of it where you have sort of things like Whisper and other apps where you can text message with people, but the texts are fleeting. They don't stick around, almost like Snapchat used to be, where you could send messages, but they would disappear. You could do it anonymously, things like that. And then you have kind of more business type applications, like think about like a recruiter, for example. And so sometimes recruiters will work for a firm and they'll try to recruit people from another firm. So like Bank of America, for example, has people who try to recruit people from, I was going to say Merrill Lynch, but Bank of America owns Merrill Lynch. So like,
Easy.
Let's use Merrill Lynch. So Merrill Lynch will have, recruiters and these recruiters will try to recruit people away from Raymond James, for example. And so the person being recruited doesn't want their employer to find out they're being recruited, because they can triage that and kind of shut down the person's clients and prevent them from taking the clients with them. So having an application like a secret messaging application where the messages disappear, they can't be seen over the corporate network. That is another use case. Medical discussion is another use case where, say, you're trying to deliver information to a patient. You want to be able to do so in a way where there's no kind of trail, and that the data is secure and can't be sniffed over the wire, meaning like a third party can't intercept the transmission of the message and decode it and actually read what the message would be. So those are kind of some of the use cases. There's tons more. You can think of like military transmissions of, troop positions, things like that. There's tons of use cases where a message absolutely cannot be compromised. And a lot of other use cases where you don't want your identity sent with the message. You don't know that you don't want someone to know that it's Cody sending Derry a message, things like that. So those are kind of the use cases for this.
So Jerry Maguire could have used it to contact his clients before leaving.
That's right. That's exactly right. And yes, and we would have been shown the money because they would have been paying us for the use of the application.
So what did we use to build it? What were the technologies you used?
So actually we used full stack JavaScript, and it's basically just on it's serverless, meaning we talk about this a lot, meaning there's no standing server. And we actually used AWS AppSync for something that it's not really supposed to be used for, but we found a way to use it. And so the one of the things that AWS AppSync offers is what's called sockets. And these sockets, so think about when you request a web page, it's basically like you knock on the door and the server answers and delivers you the web page. Well, and then closes the door. That's kind of how traditional HTTP connections work. That's how websites work. Sockets are a bit different. So it'd be like kind of you knock on the door and the server opens the door, but then leaves it open. So you can come and go as much as you want without having to open and close the door every single time. So there's basically there's a two-way connection open between both ends, the outside and the inside of the house. And so AppSync offers that in response to events via GraphQL API. And so we're just kind of skipping the GraphQL part and keeping the socket connection open for very, very, very cheap to send messages back and forth. So we used AppSync for the socket connection and a serverless socket connection. So there's no server sitting somewhere kind of that we're managing. All that is taken care of for us. And then on the front end, we use JavaScript to build embeddable widgets that will enable the front end, the UI to be embedded anywhere. You can embed this on a web page. You can create a standalone application out of it. JavaScript will then dynamically construct the UI and also take care of decrypting the messages, encrypting the messages, and capturing the input, as well as doing things like every 30 seconds, if it doesn't detect motion, it wipes the screen clean, so you can't accidentally forget to close your browser and someone comes along and reads the decoded messages. It'll wipe it out if there's no activity in 30 seconds.
So is the serverless component of it handling basically all of the encryption stuff?
Okay, so
what's actually happening on the serverless side?
Yeah, so actually nothing happens on the serverless side. It's literally just a conduit. Nothing happens. The message passes through directly. And so people are like, well, then there is people with knowledge of it will say, well, okay, well, there is a record of the transaction somewhere, because there has to be server logs, which is true. However, number one, the socket is over SSL, so it's secure. So you can't, or it's very difficult to listen in as a third party on the transmission of that message. Secondly, even though it's sent over SSL, the message is encrypted on the client before it touches the serverless tunnel. So even if someone were to get a hold of the server logs, or actually do a man in the middle attack and intercept the message as it passes through the tunnel, all they would see is a bunch of gobbledygook, because it's all encrypted on the client. And so the way that works is, whenever you initiate a session, so like let's say again, I work for I work for Merrill Lynch, and I'm trying to recruit you, and you don't want anyone to find out. So I would use Talk It Out to create a new chat session. And when I create a new chat session, I create a password and a key for the password and a key for the chat session. So the password would be something that I could email to you or whatever, call you, tell you, whatever. The password is this for the chat session. The key is something totally different. The key is something that we would agree upon prior in a separate meeting, maybe electronically, probably not electronically, more like in person. Like when recruiters meet with their clients, they'll say, hey, whenever I need to contact you, we're going to do so through this application called Talk It Out, and our encryption key is going to be best dad kind of thing, or anything like that. So they have to remember that encryption key. And so then when they get pinged for a request for the chat session, not only do they need the password for that session, but they need to know the encryption key. So if they know the password, they can get into the chat session. But if they don't know the encryption key, then all the messages, when they receive them, are going to be encrypted. So they're going to look like just a bunch of spaghetti on their screen kind of thing. So the initiator puts in the encryption key, and the receiver puts in the encryption key. And if they match, then the JavaScript on the client decrypts the message when it's received. And the other thing to notice is, as this isn't a one-to-one, this is a many-to-many type application. So anyone can join the chat session that has the password and the encryption key.
Did a Periscope question, which is, how do you secure the password and encryption key?
Yeah,
which I guess is sort of just up to the user.
Right, and again, in most security situations, the big flaw is with the users, right? So, if they were dumb and they texted in the same message, hey, okay, so let me back up on another thing, because each chat session has a unique URL. So anyone who wanted to see the messages would need to know the chat URL, the password for the chat room, and the encryption key. So basically, if you're smart, and like I said, you deliver that encryption key like in person or over the phone, somewhere separate from where you deliver the password and the URL, then you are protecting yourself. And the app says that, like, hey, don't send the password and the encryption key in the same message, kind of thing. So that would be on the user of the application. If again, they like send it to the person they're trying to recruit, if they sent the URL, the password, and the encryption key, over corporate email. And then Raymond James could get the email and they could get in and see the chat session. However, even then they would have to so quickly get into the chat session before it ends. And there's no history of the chat. So like, let's say you and I are chatting for a long time about like your compensation package and all that stuff. And then I did email you all the information in once, and corporate flags it. And they're like, oh, we need to get on this. We need to see what's being discussed. Number one, each member in the chat room would get a notification that someone else has joined the chat. So if you're thinking this is a one-on-one chat and another person joins, you're like, okay, this isn't right. And secondly, when they join the chat, they only see new messages. They don't see the old messages that were there. There's no history of that. So in that particular case, now what Raymond James couldn't do is Raymond James couldn't subpoena our logs, our server logs. They couldn't do that. So they would be SOL in terms of decrypting those, getting the old messages. Now, if say like the FBI got a hold of the encryption key, then they could subpoena the server logs, and then they could go through and decrypt the server logs using the encryption key, and then they would have a record. But the FBI would have to first get the encryption key before they could subpoena the server logs.
I just realized Raymond James Stadium in Tampa is named after Raymond James, the company.
Right. That's right.
I had no idea. I never put that together. I thought Raymond James was just a dude.
Well, I think he is, but he also started a financial firm. So
it's also a company.
Yep.
Company and a dude.
And one thing I want to clarify is we, as Gunner Technology, as the creators of the application, we don't know your encryption key either. We don't know the password or the encryption key. We could get the password by going through the server logs, but we could not get the encryption key by going through the server logs. So like let's say, for example, this is being used for nefarious purposes, like drug transactions, for example, and the FBI came to us and said, we want access to your server logs, we would say, sure, here are our server logs. And they're like, okay, this is encrypted. We need the encryption key so we can see what's going on. We could literally say, we don't have the encryption key, never have it. Never does it touch any part of our servers. So we couldn't give you that because we don't know what it is. We have no record of what the encryption key is.
I was just going to ask, because there was an article recently about Zello, the voice chat app, and like I guess jihadis had used it for like the better part of a decade. So okay. is there no way to track messages?
There is absolutely no way to track the messages. This is about as secure as it gets. Again, the flaws in this are at the end of the user. So like, or at the user's end rather. So again, let's say, we're conducting a drug transaction or something like that, and I'm the dealer or the distributor and you're the buyer, and you want to screw me. Like, let's say you're working with the FBI. You could take your phone, for example, and take pictures of the screen to show that what was being said. However, at the other end of it, there is nothing to tie. Like I could put my name in as Lion Tamer 23. So like, you could then show these screenshots to the FBI and say, here, look, I'm ratting this guy out. And they would be like, who's Lion Tamer 23? And we would have no idea how to answer that question. I don't know. We have no user accounts. We have nothing. The FBI may be able to glean that information from the server logs to see who map Lion Tamer 23 to an IP address. But then again, the security is on the user's end. So if they're using that from a VPN or a public library or anything like that, then they're absolutely safe, because even that Lion Tamer 23 is only going to map to a baloney IP address.
So this is like the libertarian godsend where anyone can say anything without fear of any oversight.
Yeah, it really is. And it's kind of taken off as we built it for an original client, and then, like I said, it's the use cases have kind of spread, and it's interesting because we haven't been. The original client was not using it for nefarious ends, meaning illegal purposes. However, we've kind of opened it up, and it's possible. Again, we have no idea. We have no idea what people are using it for. So it's kind of like you consent in that matter, where we developed that application for sexual consent, and like the only identification is the device of the phones. So we can see what people are consenting to, but we have no idea who it is, where they're coming from, what age they are. Like we're like, in this respect, we're really bad businessmen because we have no way of capitalizing on the Facebook model of selling user data because we don't know what it is. We have no way of knowing what it is.
What were some challenges faced when developing Talk It Out?
The big one was figuring out how to have a way to have scalable sockets. And so we talk about scalability. And for a while, we were using AWS's IoT platform to kind of hack serverless sockets. And so that actually got really expensive. It would scale just fine, but as the number of messages increased, we would get hammered with kind of usage plan caps, not caps, but rates. And so cost really, really skyrocketed from there. We'd actually used IoT sockets for another project. So we were pretty familiar with that, but we weren't used to so many messages being sent. So that's when, around that time, AppSync got released, and AppSync has a much better model for charging than IoT. IoT meaning Internet of Things. And so think about, for example, you have a car tracking device. That would be an IoT device. You have to have a socket open to a server back somewhere where you can send location data constantly. And so that was kind of why IoT offered serverless. AppSync offered serverless sockets for a totally different reason and under a much better model in terms of pricing for what we were trying to do. So that was the biggest challenge, is figuring out a way, again, being totally secure. We didn't want to maintain a server somewhere, and also being kind of like unpredictable usage. We wanted to be able to scale instantly with kind of no direct interference on our end. So that was the perfect, that was the challenge, is finding a way to do that, and serverless through AppSync was the way we found to best accomplish that.
Cool. Any final thoughts on Talk It Out?
It's weird because, you know, I say this a lot, and we're a service company, and so we were approached by a company that said they don't tell us what they want us to build. They said, here's our problem. And so we came up with the solution. And so the interesting thing is, we're a service company and we build things for clients. However, this is an instance where it's almost a shame that we're not a product company, because it really is the most secure form of chat that I can think of. And not only that, but you can embed it. Like I said, you can embed it anywhere. So if you've been somewhere on a site where you like open it up and leave it open for like 10 seconds, and there's like a little window that pops up and says, hey, do you need help finding, do you need help or to talk to a service representative today? And you can be like, yes or no. And if you say yes, it starts a chat. Well, you can do that with Talk It Out. However, you could do absolutely secure chat with someone on the other end and talk about whatever you wanted. Like I said, in terms of like a healthcare provider, you could discuss your blood results with your doctor, and it would be completely HIPAA secure, or HIPAA compliant rather. And all the doctor's office would have to do is embed this small little snippet of HTML on their website, and then they would have HIPAA compliant chat right off the bat.
That's pretty sweet. So I guess that's going to do it for this episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Join us next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode, the next case study we're going to do, which I guess is sort of TBD right now. Hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. And while you're on our Facebook page, make sure to answer our question of the week, which, remind them again, Cody, what that is.
Are you concerned about our, meaning the U.S. elections? I should have specified so I don't offend our international audience. Are you concerned about the U.S. elections being compromised / hacked in this midterm election?
However you define compromise. Yes. So check out the associated blog post for this episode at gunnertech.com. The podcast will be up on iTunes. You can check out our new ebook about a career in tech at Amazon, iBooks, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. And I think that's going to do it. So check us out next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.